So this next story is kind of a weird one. This is a story about the Kentucky Mummy. So there was a man named Charles Speedy Atkins. He got the nickname Speedy from how he worked in the tobacco fields and how fast he could wrap up tobacco. So they ended up calling him Speedy his entire life. Anyway, he was born in 1875. He died in 1928 right here in Paducah. He was fishing on the river, fell in. They found his body and drowned. So back then, like many small towns in middle America, the town was segregated. And there was only one African-American funeral home, and that is where we were at right now. So this was a man named A.Z. Hammock owned this home, the Hammock Bowes Funeral Home, and it was the only African-American funeral home. So they brought the body of Charles Speedy Atkins right here to do the funeral proceedings and give him a pauper's burial. He didn't really have any family or friends or anything, so except for A.Z. Hammock, who owned the funeral home. A.Z. actually knew Speedy. He was one of the only friends that Speedy seemed to have around town. He didn't have any family, but they signed him over to AZ, and AZ had this idea for a long time for a body preservative made from items you got at the grocery store. So he decided to test it on Speedy, and it worked. He actually filled Speedy with this solution, and it made his entire body turn into what sort of felt like a piece of wood. And instead of burying him, he kept him. That's right. He kept his friend, put him in a tuxedo, and kept him in a closet, and people would come from miles around to see Speedy Atkins. He would bring him out, put him on roller skates, and he would pull him by the tie sometimes, and people could pose with him and see him. He never charged them, but he held on to him. In 1937, all of Paducah, especially where we were at, was under 10 feet of water. The Ohio River flooded, the Tennessee River flooded. It was a massive flood. It wiped out a very large chunk of the city, and which is why we have a flood wall today here. But they, of course, had abandoned the funeral home, and Speedy's body actually floated away. It was found miles from here downriver and returned to the funeral home, where he was continued to be displayed. In the 1950s and 60s, news organizations started running stories about Speedy.
Finally tonight, he's considered by some to be the pride of Paducah as he stands tall in his tuxedo greeting tourists and customers. The problem is the guy's been dead for years. His name is Speedy, and he is more popular dead than alive. Bob Hansen reports from Paducah, Kentucky.
Paducah, Kentucky. It's a city founded on the river, a city proud of its history, whether it's an old church or an historic hotel. But there's a piece of the past here you won't read about in the brochures, an attraction you'll only hear about from the people who live here.
Speedy.
Speedy! Speedy! This is Speedy, a man who spent the last 60 years in this Paducah funeral home.
I said, Speedy, you were nobody, but you somebody now.
It was May 1928, and Speedy Atkins had come here to the banks of the Tennessee River to go fishing. Well, Speedy drowned that day. His friends fished him out of the river and took him over to the Hammock funeral home. Speedy never left.
Come on, Speedy, you got some friends who want to see you.
Velma Hammock is the best friend Speedy ever had. She cares for him, makes sure his tux looks good, and props him up when visitors come by.
People die in 4 or 5 days you bury. But somebody wants to see how a man looks been dead 35 or 40 years, because it's hard to believe that you can keep anybody that long.
Speedy was embalmed 61 years ago this month as part of an experiment by Velma's husband, A.Z. Hammock. A.Z. died in the 40s and was buried, but not Speedy, even though he did get out once back in 37.
And Speedy floated out in the flood, and the men happened to see him and got in a boat and rescued him, brought him back. And the only thing happened, he just got a little mud on him, flood mud, and I scrubbed that off.
Velma says she'll bury Speedy soon, in 2 years, on what would have been her husband's 100th birthday. Velma says she'll miss her dead friend, but says he'll never be forgotten.
He's a legend now.
I'm Bob Hansen for CNN in Paducah, Kentucky.
He was on the night show. That's right, they actually flew him in a seat in an airplane, along with AZ had already passed on, but his wife Velma kind of kept the Speedy thing alive, and she now in the funeral home. She flew out with him, and they were on this night show. So finally, after a lot of pressure from the public, as you can imagine, in 1994, Speedy was finally married. So that's where they buried him. In 1994, 66 years after he died, he was laid to rest right here. We're in Maple Lawn Cemetery here in Paducah, Kentucky, and apparently over 200 people came to his funeral, and it went on for a very long time, and there was a letter that was sent. No one there at the funeral knew Speedy when he was alive, and except a lady in Baltimore sent a letter to the funeral, and they read it at the funeral. She had met, her and her sister used to walk past where Speedy lived when they were little girls here in Paducah, and he always had a couple of pennies for each of them. And she recalled how many times they would go get gumballs and everything with the pennies from Speedy. And it was a nice memory, and it's pretty impressive that that was the only person at his funeral that actually had any contact with him when he was alive. A lot of people have memories of taking actual school trips. They would take field trips to go see Speedy. I mean, they would wheel him out of the closet every time, and people would come in and get their pictures made with him. There's tons of pictures that people have with Speedy. Honestly, no one knew him when he was alive, and a ton of people knew him after he died, which is why his gravestone says he was buried as a celebrity. He did not die as one, but he was buried as one. Anyway, that's the story of the Kentucky Mummy. It's really weird if you ever see any footage of his TV appearance or of pictures with people in him that happened in a modern era where we're just dragging this poor man through the afterlife just so we can get a photo and stand next to a mummy. So what I really want to know is, what was in AZ Hammock's preservative that he got at the grocery store? So this is the Irvin Cobb Hotel. This was built in 1929 right here in downtown Paducah. You can tell it's at the time was a very ornate hotel. It has amazing trim work and a lot of stained glass windows. Some of them are original, a lot of them have been busted out over time. The hotel's gone through a lot of different phases. In fact, it's not a hotel anymore, it's actually apartments. But they've kept the lobby intact. The Irvin Cobb Hotel was named for Irvin S. Cobb. He is known as the Duke of Paducah. They gave him that title because he was probably one of the most famous people from Paducah, at least in the early 20th century. He was born here in 1876, which, little sidebar, that's a year after Speedy Atkins was born. Gives you a little bit more perspective on that. But he lived to 1944 when he died at his home in New York. He was born in 1876 here. He became a writer and Paducah's first filmmaker. He made his first short film in 1915, so he was very, very early on with it. And moved to New York back in the late teens, and he covered World War I for the New York World Post, which was Joseph Pulitzer's famous magazine. And in fact, he was their best writer. He was the highest paid reporter in the United States at that time. He went on to Hollywood after that, so he wrote so many different short films and regular film scripts, TV, something like 28 or 30 different movies and TV shows of his that got picked up to actually be made. He was a very, very well-known writer, and he loved writing about people that he knew growing up here in Kentucky. So a lot of his characters have that really rich tapestry. H.P. Lovecraft has actually used several stories of his as framework for his later works. Very influential writer. He actually even hosted the 7th Academy Awards in 1935 at their Beverly Hills Hotel in Los Angeles. He also acted in a lot of these. He acted in 14 or 15 different movies. One of the movies that he acted in was called Steamboat Round the Bend, and it was Will Rogers' last film. Will Rogers actually died right after filming of this movie, and this was the last movie that was put out with him in it. In the movie, Irvin Cobb plays a tugboat captain, and the name of the boat that he was captain of was called the Pride of Paducah. And now they didn't film any of that here. They filmed it all out in Sacramento, California, and some of the southern rivers south of Sacramento. The movie came out, had a lot of hoopla because of Will Rogers' last film, and they changed the ending. They thought the ending was too sad because it was Will Rogers. Ending didn't make much sense. The film didn't really do well, Irvin Cobb died, I guess it was 9 years after that. So Steamboat Round the Bend was actually directed by John Ford, very famous Western director, famous director in Hollywood. What's interesting, and another tie into Paducah, is 30 years later, John Ford would come here to Paducah to film How the West Was Won. And those things have nothing to do with each other, but it is just an interesting coincidence. But you can still see the Irvin Cobb today. If you come to Paducah, it's actually a really beautiful building. As you can see from the lobby, you've got the old check-in desk down there. It's just an absolutely beautiful piece of old architecture, the way they used to make buildings. And it's been largely untouched ever since it opened, almost 100 years ago. I'm guessing they're like Aztec, supposed to be like Aztec Indians, or I don't know, they're really ornate, like Indian figures, which Paducah has, obviously its name for Chief Paducah, so it definitely has a very much a Native American background, Mississippian Indian to be exact. But most of the trim, like if you can see, there's different like men holding up the balconies on each corner, and they all look different. So they're actually all hand carved different figures, and I'm not really sure what the theme of it is. That seems to be a whole lot of stuff. I do see some chess pieces up on the trim. I don't know, but it's really cool to look at either way. I'm in front of Dry Ground Brewery right here in Paducah, Kentucky. Dry Ground has a unique name and there's a story behind it. This used to be owned by Luther Carson way back in 1930s. In 1937, Paducah had an absolute game changer flood, and it flooded the entire downtown area, 30 solid blocks all the way up to just south of here. When he was rescued, he came out and got off the boat right at the Red Cross area right over here, and he said to everyone that he was going to buy the first piece of dry ground that he saw, and this was it. So he built his new Coke plant, which he owned, and it was a Coca-Cola bottle distributor until the 1990s. It then sat abandoned for a couple of decades before Ed Musselman bought it and turned it into a multi-purpose building where it has a restaurant, coffee shop, and the first thing was in it was Dry Ground Brewery. It's a really cool local craft brewery, and we're going to check it out. What's happening? Yes.
Okay.
So, like at any microbrewery, the first thing you would want to do if you've never been here before is try a flight of beers. Now, Dry Ground makes over 20 different beers in-house. So we've got 6 of them to try. These are their 6 best sellers, and we're going to give them a taste. I'm joined by Andy Evitts and his other half, JD. It's Jennifer Gin Dog. That's what JD stands for. So we've got Preacher Pilsner.
Dolly the Mule.
We've got the 37 Flood. We got the Dolly the Mule. We've got the Adam's Beard, which I actually know the guy this is named after. And we have the Yardbird. And then my personal favorite that has made me inebriated multiple times, Rapture. Anyway, so what is your favorite of all these, of any of the beers that they actually sell?
Probably 37 Flood.
37 Flood, which is this one. Why
Yep.
don't you try that?
We've already
bad
had
boy?
37s today. Do you want to try it?
Yeah.
Actually, I do want to try it. That's true.
Second favorite, the hazy, the Dolly the Mule.
The Dolly. The
That one. You guys try the
and
Dolly.
Speedy.
That one's good.
Now, isn't that one smell like lemonade? I think I've had that before, where it actually smells like lemonade.
This one smells a little lemony.
Does it?
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's a hazy IPA. And man, I love them hazy IPAs.
Yeah.
I don't know of a hazy IPA other than this one because I'm not a cultured beer drinker.
When
I
you-
do know what I like, but I don't know what it's called.
When you try that Speedy later on,
Yeah.
that is a hazy IPA too.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
That one's good.
This is actually
as you
really
can
good. It's
see-
very strong, and then it smooths out the end.
When it's talking about hazy, you can see.
Oh,
Yeah,
so it's actually
difference.
talking about the texture of the beer where you can't see
Yeah.
through it. It's
Yeah.
like, it's hazy. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. So Pilsner is obviously not talking about the texture of the beer, but it's talking about the process that it's made.
Yep.
Because I can see through this. My hand is huge.
Yeah. My hand is.
Huge hand.
These are regular sized glasses, actually.
Yeah.
On me, they
We
look
have-
like literally tiny.
We
little-
have massive man hands.
like a Hulk.
Yeah, I like
This has got that really strong start to it, and then it smooths. Like as soon as you hit the peak of it, then it smooths
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
That's really tasty.
Consistently,
Yeah.
that's one of their best beers.
Really?
They-
Yeah.
There's some of these other ones change by the season,
Yeah.
by the water, by
Right.
the hops they get, by the grains they get,
Yeah.
and this one stays real consistent.
I dig that. 37 Flood. So this next one is Adam's Beard, which I've already had a couple of those today. So if you guys want to try those,
I'll take an Adam's beard.
have an Adam's Beard. So our buddy Adam, he has a very long Viking red beard. He is a former Mr. First Husband. His wife was the mayor of Paducah for the last 4 years, actually. And he has been growing that beard since right after I met him, actually. And so they named a beer after him,
Yeah.
as they do.
It's real malty.
Yeah.
It's
The
real
color
kind of
always
like-
reminded me of like Sam Adams.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of sweet and malty a little
Yeah.
bit. It's real good.
I love it. Like it's literally one of my favorite. It's kind of my go-to. Anytime I come here, I always get an Adam's Beard.
Yeah, yeah.
I try to stay away from the last one down
No,
here.
man.
But
Yeah.
I
You
can't
have
help
to work your way
myself.
up to that one.
Yeah, you do. Unfortunately, I always end up ordering them. I'll tell this story. The last time I got drunk on, this is called Rapture. John was here. I passed out on the patio. That's right, I'm a grown man. but that happened. So I passed out. John had to take me home, but I had 9 of these.
Oh shit!
And yeah, it's
They're what? Like
they're a little stout. Yeah, they're like 9 to
alcohol?
10% alcohol.
And what is that?
It is delicious. Is really
Yeah,
the only
what's-
word I have for Rapture. It is obviously a very dark beer.
Yeah.
Very stout. Is it a stout?
Rapture is a stout.
Yes.
Rapture's a stout, and it tastes stout. Let me tell you. But it's got this. They mix it with bourbon and Kentucky bourbon because we're in Kentucky, and it's the home of bourbon, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's no God. I could drink a gallon of this, and I'm not going to because that was not an enjoyable evening I just described. But it happened, you know. Glad that's not going to happen again, but it's delicious. Rapture is one of those really good finishing beers. Like if you were already like had a couple and you're like, I want one more. Rapture's the one.
Imperial stout. That's what it is.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Imperial stout. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what the difference between a regular stout and imperial stout.
Yeah,
Now, Yardbird.
The Emperor.
Do you guys like Yardbird?
One is 9.
You can have it.
Okay, I'll try Yardbird.
You try that one. That one is it up there? It's a, I can't see it. It's the top right.
Oh yeah. What's Doppelback?
It's a Doppelbock, yeah.
Oh, is that a thing? Mm-hmm. It is. Yardbird is a Doppelbock. A word I just learned was an actual word. Wow, it's got a really robust flavor.
It's loud, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's like your mouth almost wants to chew it.
Yeah.
It's like could be oatmeal. No, wow, yeah, that's got a really, really big flavor. It's very thick, and it stays. It's in the mouth still. Not bad, but it's very, very full. Rapture is a bit smoother than this, maybe because of the bourbon. I'm not 100% sure, but that's pretty tasty actually. But it has got a bigger flavor than probably any of these other ones, even Rapture, I would say. Wow, that's really strong. Yeah.
And this one is the Preacher Pilsner. It's a Pilsner. It's real clean
Yeah,
and
it's got a
crisp.
clean finish.
You know, it's
Yeah.
funny.
It's good.
I don't know how they do it, but like all 6 of these are different flavors, but you can kind of all tell that they're a dry ground beer. You know, it's
Yeah.
like
There's
you
something
could try.
about them. You can tell.
I will say that
try-
is unique.
You could try a
Yeah.
Pilsner and a Rapture from somebody else, and you'd never know it was
Right.
the same brewery.
I
But
completely
there's
agree.
something they do, and I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
each one you can be like, it's a dry ground beer.
Well, they put meth in it.
That's what it is. It's the
I've noticed that
amphetamines.
really.
Keep coming
I can
back.
drink at any brewery across the nation. I always come back here. I have to.
Yeah.
Because, you know, of the meth beer. I'm just kidding.
Is
It
this-
is
That's
addicting,
their
though.
Preacher
I will say that.
Pilsner.
It's got a very, very distinct flavor to each of theirs. I've been in a lot of microbreweries, but Dry Ground is one of the best. It truly is. Well, this is excellent. Thank you guys for coming out. Toast to you guys. And listen, Andy and Jen own a small business. Small businesses need your help. MightyTeesDesign.com. They make awesome t-shirts. They did not make this one. I have a ton of his though. He knows I have like 20 of them. But they would make a shirt like this because they're awesome. You guys gotta check them out. Well, Speedy never got to have one of these, but he's had a beer named after him since Dry Ground opened in 2014, and it is absolutely delicious. So we're gonna grab these and go finish them on the patio.